Welcome to Watch the Bookerman, and as well as booking the go-home show to WCW Mayhem 2002, we also have the task of trying to get rid of two of these big red morale issues, because it worries me every time. Every time I have a decision come in, I wonder if one of these guys is quitting on me. The other red note that we have is the contract of Simon Diamond. Now, I've not been massively impressed with him, or rather my booking of him hasn't particularly been anything too interesting, but I do think he is worthy of a place on the WCW roster nonetheless, and we will offer him a 1-year contract extension to continue as part of the new revelation. I always like to see it when people are very easy to do business with, not making any demands, so that's definitely stood him in good stead. I will also just quickly pre-book some of the matches that we have planned for WCW Nitro this week. It's something that I often forget to do, but I think it's a nice thing to show at the start of the episode. Basically, here's what you've got to look forward to. I'll remove that segment that I accidentally pre-booked for Thunder a good while back now. So 3 matches pre-booked there, all with storyline reasons, 3 really good TV matches as well as far as I'm concerned. We also did sort of set up Buff Bagwell versus Jerry Lawler last week, but didn't confirm it, and I was thinking of doing Mike Awesome versus Andrew Martin. I kind of like the idea of opening the show with that and just having them go out there and absolutely tear chunks out of each other, but it might be an idea to save that for after the pay-per-view. It's where we go with the Mike Awesome Vader match or something else, so I'm not going to set that as a definite confirmed match because we didn't actually announce it on last week's show. Sometimes matches are more heavily implied than confirmed, and we will give Johnny Swinger a new contract as well to match Simon Diamond. Like I said, we've not really done a lot with them, but I think in time they can be decent members of the tag team division. We do have such a large roster now that I'm kind of toying with making WCW Worldwide a longer show, and then the rebrand that I've had for it in mind could be maybe like an hour of WCW Saturday Night Worldwide, and then the last 30 minutes is this sort of Rory's War type thing where it's a different show but under the same banner. Now, Mike Sanders is somebody who I do actually have an idea for, although I was making a complaint in the last video about having one too many stables, so it could be the case that actually, yeah, I nixed the idea before I actually get it off the ground. But I will leave Brian Knight's contract and Mike Sanders' development request there, just because of the things that I'm still thinking about, so it'll jog my memory when I next open my emails. We're going to go through. I've got a couple of signings expected to come in with the intent of them improving the morale of members of our roster. James Mitchell, somebody I probably could have brought in from the start if we're perfectly honest, but I just didn't have the wrestler for him, and this is where we have to hope that this is a sign-in rather than anybody quitting. And Horace Hogan will be here for 1 appearance. I'd say he's going to be a heel, but could we do a bit of a Hogan, Real Canadians, Real American, Christian and Test? You know, is this something with the fact that we've got a Hogan here and he's related to Mike Awesome? Maybe not. I'm going to put no, because it might. I'm wondering if putting him down in developmental might not have the same effect as bringing him to the main roster in terms of Canyon's morale. Should we call him James Vanderberg? I do like the Sinister Minister, but he could be the Sinister Minister James Vanderberg. Yeah, there's nothing that exciting about the name James Mitchell, is there? I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's actually just his name. But yeah, those two are now signed. So the moment of truth. Wow, they've not even got morale issues now, I don't think. So Mike Awesome is now pleased. I know it can change very quickly, but Horace Hogan is here for 1 night, and that's enough to make him not absolutely fuming. Fair enough, he's getting $90, so clearly I could have paid $10,000 to Mike Awesome to get his morale back up in the green, or I can pay $90 to Horace Hogan, and we're paying travel to be fair, and 10%, and I'm sure those Hogan t-shirts are going to fly off the shelves in the arena on the upcoming episode of Nitro. And the other guy is Kanyon, and he is now happy, so that's even better than pleased, I think. He's forgot about everything else now because we've signed the Sinister Minister. When you're signing people for reasons other than wrestling ideas, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see how that goes. Is there anybody who Buff Bagwell has a good relationship with? No, he dislikes everybody apart from Scott Steiner, so we're not going to be able to get his morale up before the pay-per-view. Is there anybody else? Brian Knight's got morale issues. I mean, you're free to reject an offer of a new contract. Hates Honky Tonk Man, so definitely not that. Negative opinion of Jimmy Hart, that's strange to see, and Scott Taylor. But yeah, I think I've done sort of enough looking around now, haven't I? So we will get through to Wednesday night, unless anything of note turns up, of course, and I will come back with that. And there always seems to be something when I say that, doesn't there? So Nova has been sidelined with a cracked sternum while wrestling on last week's show. And it's funny, actually, at the end of last week's episode, I did talk about turning the injury frequency up because we weren't getting enough injuries. So I've tempted fate there, haven't I? And Nova will now not be competing this Saturday night. And again, another funny, strange thing. I typed in the commentary on Worldwide that it was going to be Jet and De Niro wrestling against Brian Knight and Nelson Knight last week, and funnily enough, that wasn't a typo, it was a premonition, because Nova will now not be available to compete, and I do believe it said that he would be out for, just 25 days, so it's not good. I probably will just keep him off screen, to be fair, and I do always forget that is a possibility on house shows that you can get injuries. I will just check my emails, because I think most people will have seen on screen there, a huge event took place last night. I thought there was a lot of WWF related news and title changes, and then I remembered this Sunday was WWF WrestleMania 18, and I will now share with you what went down. So Essa Rios defeated Taka Michinoku for the WWF Light Heavyweight Championship, Ivory defeated Jacqueline, Albert defeated Bradshaw for the European title, Bubba Ray defeated Scotty 2 Hotty for the WWF Hardcore title, Lita defeated Daphne, Chris Benoit, Triple H and Rikishi defeated Hardcore Holly and Double Trouble. So a little bit of a underwhelming match for Triple H to be involved in, but where we've got the American Outlaws of Road Dogg and Dustin Rhodes, the badass Billy Gunn has also found himself a new partner in Double Trouble with Mark Henry. I do actually quite like that as a pairing, to be honest. Trish Stratus defeats Molly Holly to retain the WWF Women's title. Chris Jericho and Hulk Hogan team together against the Ultimate Warriors at WrestleMania. That's absolutely genius. I don't care that it's Raven and Taz. Hogan over Ultimate Warriors at WrestleMania. Absolutely love the booking there. Rhino defeats Chyna for the Intercontinental Championship. The Rock defeats Kane in a 100 rated tables match. Stone Cold Steve Austin not putting over the youngster Edge, and Kurt Angle retaining the WWF World Heavyweight Championship in a fantastic main event against the Big Show. So not quite as wacky a card as I expected. A few great things in there. I absolutely love that. WrestleMania 18 in the books, but we do now go through to more than Mania. This is Mayhem, or rather I should say the Go Home Show 2, Mayhem 2002. Honestly, that's one of my favourite things I've ever seen in TW. A tag team put together just so Hulk Hogan can go over the Ultimate Warrior. And we do have a decision here. Nice to see. Simon Diamond will be staying with the company, and I'm assuming that it's likely going to be the 20th of March when we see Johnny Swinger also commit long term to the company. Well, another injury. I know it's not on our roster, it's on the TCW roster, but yeah, it's Last Gasp 2002. But I think this is going to be a very, very long intro, so I will now just try and get through this and go into WCW Nitro. I feel like it's the third or fourth time I've said that now. Get rid of those pieces of news and let's book the Go Home Show. Now, I don't know why I've clicked on that, because as you know, we never give anybody the night off here in WCW. I've not even put Booker T. I don't know why I've not done that. Very, very stupid sometimes. We'll go back to the region that held our last pay-per-view. Select this venue. Are you sure? Yes. Yes. Oh, where have I just put that? The Chose Alaris Centre. What is that? I'm going to have to Google now what the Chose Alaris Centre is. If this is like a 200-seater, then I've... Oh, okay, so it is at least... I thought I'd put us in like a high school gym then for a minute. I think... Yeah, it's 21,000, so we're not going to sell it out. It's going to be the issue. It's probably cost us a lot of money to book out a bigger venue than we needed. But I prefer that and having a half-empty building than I do to... well, what would have been a very, very embarrassing thing to see. We'll spend some creative energy. I like a creative finish. I feel like every show needs a creative finish, or not every show needs a creative finish, but it's always important to have one of them in the bank. It's a safe bet to Christian Cage, but I'll go for a character idea, a near certainty, so I'm happy. I really like character ideas. And then do I get two character ideas or do I get a creative finish? The upside of getting a creative finish is that it could be one that we can use for the... Yeah, I think... my heart is saying get a character idea, my head is saying creative finish, so a creative finish, likely to succeed for Sean O'Hare, so doesn't really help us in the long term. I should have got a character idea, but I will now go through the locker room incidents. Jimmy Yang and Rob Van Dam, two bright sparks in the locker room. Sugar Shane. Kanyon says that Arn Anderson is disgruntled, so something to keep in mind. Scott Steiner's also disgruntled. This absolute mess of a backstage situation that we've got. Fit Finley's disgruntled. Scott Armstrong's, what's happened to Arn Anderson in the last that's changed? Yeah, the backstage area absolutely winds me up, so I'm not going to focus on it too much. I don't need to address the roster, but I will look at somebody who has... do we give it... I don't think it makes that much of a difference to morale. I think it makes a slight difference, but I think I'm going to look at somebody who's got cooled or below momentum. I don't care about any of these enough to do it. I know it would be probably a good idea to give Jerry Lynn, and there's nobody else I really have in mind. So yeah, we'll use the creative idea this week on Jerry Lynn. Was a success. He now has a bit more momentum, I believe. Yeah, so he's now warm. So a successful character idea for him that is going to stand him in good stead as he faces Rob Van Dam at Mayhem. Of course, at the end of this week's episode, we will put the full card on screen. But for now, this is who we are working with on tonight's WCW Nitro. Those 3 pre-booked matches that I'm really, really looking forward to. I think we're going to have a very good go-home show. Lots of stories to further as well as the action. So hopefully I can deliver on selling you on this upcoming pay-per-view. Nitro begins with a really good match, which I've been sort of building to since Andrew Martin very first turned up in the company. Now, he wasn't actually happy with the booking of this match, but it is, the priority at the minute is trying to build up Mike Awesome. He's kind of got the match won. He sets up Andrew Martin for an awesome bomb in the middle of the ring, but it's at that point that Big Van Vader sort of plods out from the back, and upon spotting him, Awesome throws Andrew Martin to one side essentially and begins a brawl with Big Van Vader. This results in a disqualification win. Now, it doesn't quite take away from Andrew Martin because he's not getting pinned, but at the same time, the commentators do put over that Mike Awesome had that match won had Vader not come out, but it is just a DQ victory as we want to start after a really good match with a huge brawl between Big Van Vader and Mike Awesome, with Vader briefly getting the better of Mike Awesome and sending him onto the apron. Coming back in, however, Vader is dropped by Mike Awesome, who hits an impressive slingshot shoulder block, and it's again about showing the athletic moves that Mike Awesome has in his arsenal, and we're showing that more and more now that he's a babyface. Heading to the outside, a fired up Mike Awesome grabs a table from under the ring and brings it inside. He lifts Van Vader up, but it appears that the monster has been playing possum as he hits a headbutt that wobbles Mike Awesome. He is then able to regain control and sets up Mike Awesome on the table, putting him through it with a big splash from the second turnbuckle. Vader then stands over Mike Awesome in the ring. There's obviously concern for him. He's just been squashed by basically the second heaviest man on the roster. Awesome is struggling for breath. He is holding his ribs. The implication that there could be something broken there as medical staff come and check on Mike Awesome, who we do know does eventually leave of his own volition on his own 2 feet, but hopefully between a hard-hitting opening match that unfortunately doesn't get the finish that it may be deserved, and we probably will run that match back again another time, especially when it got such a good rating. Vader putting Mike Awesome down and setting up what I think is an interesting little undercard match for the pay-per-view. Diamond Dallas Page is interviewed outside the locker room where he is talking about tonight's main event match where he will face Sean O'Haire. Now, these two haven't had too many issues, but in recent weeks just a little bit of a niggle between the two men has blown into what now is a bit of a blow-off match. The two men had crossed words last week, and DDP agrees with Arn Anderson that these two need to get this out of their system, but after tonight the focus needs to be taking down Ric Flair and his group. That's why tonight he says may the best man win, because having spoke to Arn Anderson, it's also going to be the case that the winner of this match will face Mark Jindrak at Mayhem. Jindrak has beaten Stevie Ray, Booker T and Chuck Palumbo within the space of just a short few weeks since he returned, but at Mayhem, DDP is going to bring him back down to earth with a bang. Whatever DDP thinks of Ken Shamrock personally, Dallas is here to ensure that he gets a fair shot at Scott Steiner and the World Heavyweight Championship, a fair shot that nobody else has had essentially. With all that said, Sean O'Haire has had some pretty choice words for him last week, and he's no less angry at him now than he was back then. DDP says that he hopes that unlike that Battle Royal, O'Haire doesn't enter tonight's main event with his partner Chuck Palumbo in tow, but if he does, Dallas will make what Jindrak did to Palumbo last week look like it was a walk in the park. So while he's not necessarily stoking the flame any further, he is still sending those shots at O'Haire and Palumbo after their issues in recent weeks. Chavo Guerrero Jr. then cuts a promo elsewhere in the back, stood with Psicosis and explained that he has some bad news. He's asked Arn Anderson that he gets to personally tell the fans this because he is unable to compete against AJ Styles tonight, and he wants to first apologise to Psicosis for letting him down and to the fans. However, he and Arn did manage to come to a solution, one that he feels will suit everybody. Tonight, Chavo Guerrero will be replaced by a debuting luchador who will not only be making their WCW debut tonight, but will be wrestling on US soil for the very first time. He tells AJ Styles that the next huge lucha star is coming for him tonight, and what's more, he is the latest member of Lucha Royale. So we have managed to sign a replacement for Juventud Guerrera, who gives a slightly different dynamic to the group going forward, but you'll see who that is later tonight when he faces AJ Styles. back to ringside with a segment that's not quite as good as I'd hoped. I know I'm really pushing Arn Anderson into this storyline now, and the downside to that is these ratings aren't quite as good as they could be. But the commentators discussed the return of Shane McMahon last week and his announcement that he will return to the ring at Mayhem, albeit in an unsanctioned fight against Ric Flair, who has not competed in a wrestling ring since the 26th of March 2001. Footage is then shown of what went down last week, with Hudson and Kelly saying that we will hear from both Ric Flair and Shane McMahon tonight. Coming out from the back following this, and Anderson addresses the crowd. He says that if there's one word that he can use to describe the landscape of WCW at the moment, and let's be honest, we've already seen it in tonight's opening match and what happened after it, it's mayhem. This Sunday, that is exactly what it's going to be and more, as Arn Anderson then runs through the match card for that show, including 4 huge championship matches that have already been confirmed. Anderson adds that due to his focus on Ric Flair this Sunday, Shane McMahon has also given Arn control of tonight's show, as well as WCW Mayhem this Sunday. So the idea being there that Shane knows that he can run the show to the best of his abilities and also prepare for that match. The Enforcer says that there's going to be a couple more matches added to that card throughout the course of the night, so of course everybody wants to tune in for that, as well as everything else, including that huge main event with Diamond Dallas Page and Sean O'Haire. He also confirms that Big Van Vader versus Mike Awesome will take place at the pay-per-view in a tables match. Ric Flair then comes out as Arn Anderson seems to be done with what he has to say, and he says that he can see in Arn Anderson's eyes he is absolutely loving the power that has been handed to him, but he better not get too comfortable behind that desk in that office, because when Ric Flair destroys Shane McMahon this Sunday, the only person filling the gap left behind by him will be Ric Flair. However, if Arn Anderson starts making some better decisions and starts making them soon, then Rick might let him keep the job of doing the dirty work and being the second in command. But Rick knows Arn and he's loyal to a fault, and that's why the Enforcer needs to sit front row and watch closely on Sunday night before deciding which side he's really on. The old saying is that if you can't beat them, join them, but it's not going to be made quite so easy for people in WCW who've shown their loyalty to Shane McMahon, and that currently includes Arn Anderson, to come back with their tail between their legs. And like he says, that doesn't just go for Arn, but it goes for everybody who decided to bet on Shane McMahon. Essentially, his point is that not just anybody gets to roll with the Nature Boy. You have to be the selection of Ric Flair. He selected Scott Steiner. He selected Mark Jindrak. And anybody who feels that they can step up, step out and do just that, then be his guest. But there are no guarantees coming from Ric Flair is the point that he's making. The only people stupider than those backing Shane McMahon throughout all this is Shane McMahon himself. One, for agreeing to fight Ric Flair in a match where anything goes. I mean, that might just be the biggest mistake of his life. But moreover, he is going to regret getting his checkbook out in the first place and buying this company almost a year ago. At Mayhem, Ric Flair is going to take the poison of the McMahon gene out of WCW, and this time next week, almost exactly a year since the darkest day in WCW history, there will be a new dawn for WCW, and it will be led by Ric Flair. So putting very, very grand terms on this match, and while obviously it's not a match for the control of WCW or anything like that, we're certainly, with the words of the people involved, setting this up as very much the be-all and end-all in this current Flair's WCW versus Shane's WCW storyline. Now the 60 rating suggests it didn't quite hit as hard as I'd hoped, but I hope at least people are intrigued and wanting to see where this is going. Now, I've made the mistake of giving Jerry Lynn microphone time here as he is interviewed by Mike Tenay in the back. He says that Rob Van Dam, you better be watching tonight as he steps in the ring with Sugar Shane, because for most of the last year, Jerry has had to do just that. He's had to sit back and watch RVD week in and week out, all the while knowing that he is better than him. While Jerry has been hidden away on Saturday Night Worldwide, RVD has been getting all the praise, all the plaudits, all the opportunities, but that ends at Mayhem. Jerry Lynn is going to drop Sugar Shane on his head tonight, and then he's going to do the exact same thing to Rob Van Dam this Sunday at the pay-per-view. Now, I do have how I want to book this match at the pay-per-view in mind, but when Jerry Lynn's pulling out 36s for his interviews, we really need to see something very impressive from him in the ring later tonight to justify whether or not I can give him the win against Rob Van Dam. It's It would be a huge moment for him however he manages to do it, but I really need to see something in this match against Sugar Shane that makes me think actually it is worth, or he deserves to be given that kind of opportunity. We then get the entrance of AJ Styles, who awaits the arrival of his opponent. Coming out from the back, Chavo Guerrero takes a microphone and he says that he's sorry to make everybody wait, but he feels that a moment of this magnitude requires an introduction worthy of it. Tonight, World Championship Wrestling will be introduced to a new Lucha star, a member of Lucha royalty, and the man who is going to secure Psicosis his Cruiserweight Championship shot at Mayhem. As Chavo Guerrero goes to introduce this man, AJ Styles is perhaps predictably jumped from behind by Psicosis. Psicosis targets the knee of AJ Styles in a quick but brutal assault, which continues until the rabid Psicosis is able to be prized away by the referee. However, after leaving the ring, Psicosis grabs the leg of AJ Styles, dragging him to the corner and wrapping it around a turnbuckle. He then takes a steel chair and smashes the knee of AJ Styles in. Basically, a really violent, repetitive attack from him. Chavo then yells out for Dave Penza to do his job and introduce AJ Styles' opponent. Once AJ Styles is able to get back to his feet, albeit struggling, and he tells the referee he's okay to compete, so pride coming in the way there. His opponent makes his way out from the back, introduced us from Tijuana, Mexico, or wherever, Principe Justicia Jr., and this is of course better known, as you can tell from the picture, as Abyss, Prince Justice as he was at the time, but he has been adopted by the Lucha royalty, and in 3 minutes and 32, AJ Styles does try to fight back. He tries to fly, but ultimately the story of the match is that the damage was done. Now, yes, we're booking the Cruiserweight champion to lose to a debuting star in just 3.5 minutes, and AJ was furious about this himself, but I think the story more than protects AJ Styles. And yeah, it's a different way of doing it. It's a different way of getting to a Cruiserweight Championship match. But ultimately, this is one of those matches that's more of a segment. And AJ Styles kicks out of a chokeslam early on. But a black hole slam, or whatever Chavo decides that's going to be called in future, puts the Cruiserweight champion down, and Chavo and Psicosis then return to the ring, raising the hand of the victorious Principe Justicia Jr., the absolute giant. The commentator's putting over just how ridiculous this was. First of all, that is not your traditional luchador, but it was also an already battered AJ Styles being forced to compete against what appears to be a completely untamed savage monster. Psicosis then takes centre stage as Chavo raises the hand of the man who will face AJ Styles for the World Cruiserweight Championship at Mayhem, and the commentators just put over absolute disgust at the way that this has went down. It's a complete setup by Chavo Guerrero and Lucha Royale, but it does mean that Psicosis will get a shot at AJ Styles, and I think at least it is an impactful debut for this 6'8" tall monster. Dime Dallas Page is shown preparing for the main event when he is confronted by Chuck Palumbo. Chuck says that he's heard DDP's interview earlier and he just wants to know what the shots at him were all about. He's done nothing, he's not got involved in this, so DDP needs to watch his mouth. DDP wants to laugh it off, but Chuck says he's had just about enough of this idea that he's secondary to Sean O'Haire. Is it because he's not as hot-headed as his buddy? Is that what it is? Because Chuck says he is just as dangerous as that man if you get under his skin. Luckily, Sean is going to knock his head clean off in tonight's main event and shut him up, but Chuck warns him to watch his mouth in future. This tone obviously doesn't sit well with DDP, who stands up and tells Chuck that he'd better leave the locker room if he doesn't want the taste slapped right out of his mouth. Chuck says he's going to leave Dallas for Sean to deal with later, but if there's anything left of him after that, Dallas can name the time and the place, and he'll be more than happy to face him. So again, Chuck Palumbo we're seeing not that happy with the way that he's being perceived at the moment, and with this main event coming, he's just laying down the law and letting DDP that he's not going to be dragged into this and spoke down to. Chavo Guerrero, the giant Principe Justicia Jr. and Psicosis enter the office of Arn Anderson. Now I've said that Principe Justicia Jr. name several times now, and not once have I been confident in my pronunciation of it, so please correct me if it's very, very wrong. Chavo's in high spirits about what he managed to pull off just moments ago, and tells Chavo, well done, the contracts will be signed, the match will be made, and he should be proud of himself for managing to pull the wool over everybody's eyes and getting his buddy the title shot that they felt he deserved. However, you may have played your card a little bit too early there, because not only is Chavo Guerrero and whatever that is behind him barred from the building at Mayhem, but just 24 hours before the pay-per-view, he's putting Psicosis in action on Saturday night on Worldwide. Chavo protests, and Psicosis doesn't look too happy with this turn of events, but ultimately there's not much they can do, and I am concerned. I know I'm trying to push mid-card storylines here, but some of the ratings on tonight's show leave a lot to be desired, and then when your main segments with Flair and Arn are only getting 60s, I'm slightly concerned about the show, I will admit. Before introducing footage that was recorded earlier this week, the commentators talk about the World Heavyweight Championship match between Scott Steiner and challenger Ken Shamrock, scheduled for this Sunday's Mayhem. Footage then shows Ken Shamrock training in his Lion's Den training facility, and it shows him to be on the top of his game, sharp as anything, and ready for whatever is coming this Sunday. So very much a vignette type thing, where we're just showing that Ken Shamrock is ultra focused. Not that good of a rating for the segment. Ahead of his match with Dustin Rhodes, Christian Cage comes down to the ring and parodies the trademark entrance of Jesse James, turning to silence when he realises that Andrew Martin isn't there to play his part. Christian Cage drops the bit and gets a little bit serious, telling Dustin Rhodes to get his ass to the ring. He's going to show him a preview of what's coming at Mayhem. Very straightforward, as Christian Cage then defeats Dustin Rhodes with a roll-up, and the match designed to tell the story of two very, very evenly matched competitors, but Cage is just that slight bit more savvy and gets the roll-up win. Now, Dustin Rhodes has a fantastic record. I think it was 14 wins and 2 losses since coming back to WCW, so I felt he could afford to take the defeat here tonight, and a good performance from him is superseded by a fantastic performance from Christian Cage. Cage and Martin, as we know, two very, very strong members of this roster, and just putting them in matches will usually gain heat to the storylines they're involved in. After the match, Christian Cage gets out of the ring following his quick roll-up and is joined by Andrew Martin on the ramp. The World Tag Team Champions stand tall on the stage as Jesse James does come out to check on Dustin Rhodes. So a very basic build, to be fair, to this tag team title match, but it is the American Outlaws versus the real Canadians at Mayhem, of course. Scott Steiner is then interviewed by Mike Tenay, during which time he runs down the footage from Ken Shamrock that we saw earlier tonight, mocking him, rolling around on the floor with a bunch of rookies and thinking that that's supposed to be impressive. Scott Steiner said you could line up every single guy who passed through that gym and he would beat the crap out of them every single time. He could deal with all of those guys on his way to beating up Ken Shamrock this Sunday. He says that if that's how Ken Shamrock is preparing for this Sunday's World Heavyweight Championship match, then he doesn't stand a chance. On Sunday, Steiner is going to lock in the Steiner recliner and show Ken Shamrock that he is truly the world's most dangerous man. A solid promo from Ken Shamrock is followed by the commentators looking to switch attention to our next match and the discussion of how Jerry Lynn versus Sugar Shane came to be. But making what looks to be an unscheduled appearance, Ken Shamrock storms out from the back. He doesn't have his music, he's just dressed in his regular gear, and he says that he was due out here later tonight, but enough people have talked about this match on Sunday. The time for talking is over. He calls Scott Steiner out right now to back up those words that he just said in the back, so wasting no time. After a bit of a delay where Ken gets himself increasingly fired up and just demands Scott gets out here, an equally hot Scott Steiner comes down to the ring. Shamrock tells him to bring it, and after a slight hesitation, Scott does sort of back away and then charges into the ring, the two men beginning brawling back and forth. This wasn't a match that I felt needed any sort of long back and forth promo or exposition like that. It just needed to show how savage and brutal these two men are. Scott Steiner then goes low to take control, but Shamrock fights back from underneath, eventually tossing Steiner across the ring, and when the champion comes at him once again looking to swing the title belt at him, Shamrock is able to duck and take the overzealous Steiner down, locking him in an ankle lock. Steiner then claws on the mat, trying to get to the ropes, trying to drag himself away from Shamrock, but there's kind of debate as whether this constitutes him tapping. Shamrock talks the ankle, with the commentators quite clear that if he wanted to, Shamrock could likely break the ankle of the World Heavyweight Champion just days before the World Heavyweight Championship match. So security come out, but Shamrock does actually let go of the ankle of Scott Steiner, because essentially he's saying, that's what I could do, that's what I will do on Sunday, but it's important that you get to the World Heavyweight Championship match before I do that. The champion looks furious and in a lot of pain as Shamrock is led away. If there is a repeat of this on Sunday, the commentator suggests we may well be looking at a new World Heavyweight Champion, and that's the key factor in it, isn't it? Scott has to do everything in his power to avoid the move that nobody else has been able to just yet. Now, it's not that good of a match. I did hope for better from this, but there is, again, a bit of an unclean finish. We did send them out to steal the show, so we gave them every opportunity to get up in the high ratings. A 64 is okay, a 54 from Jerry Lynn's okay, a 57 is not bad considering Sugar Shane was off his game, but during the match we get the return of Tori Wilson, not seen since she was put through a table by Sabu, and she gets up on the apron as Sugar Shane seems to have the match under control, and she's trying to talk. He's basically telling her that you couldn't have picked a worse time, essentially. And yeah, in the distraction, Jerry Lynn is able to take control and then hit the power driver to pick up the victory. But it seems like Jerry is not happy with his tainted win. People are going to put it down to Tori's involvement, so he decides that he's going to make a point by bringing loose these steel steps. And the commentators fear that Lynn has the same thing in mind that he did to a local talent just a few weeks ago. As Jerry Lynn drags Sugar Shane to the outside, Rob Van Dam runs down and makes the save, taking the fight to Jerry, who eventually decides that the best way for him to get out of there after a grueling 9-minute match is to escape into the crowd. RVD has other ideas as he pursues and looks to mount the guardrail, looking to do some kind of dive into the crowd on his future opponent. However, as RVD gets up there, Lynn kind of makes a dash for it, meaning that he's just out of reach of his Mayhem opponent. After considering a pursuit of Jerry Lynn, RVD instead gets down and decides to check on Sugar Shane, who is on the ground, but of course he has one eye on Jerry Lynn and he is fired up and furious, ready for the second installment of their rivalry up next. Now that's a really good segment, I'm very happy with that. Shows how over Rob Van Dam is, and it does make the idea of potentially him losing to Jerry Lynn, however much we want to try and get Jerry Lynn over, it feels like too big of a disparity to me personally anyway. Outside of the training room, Mike Tenay gets word with Fit Finlay, who has been working closely with Shane McMahon in recent weeks ahead of his unsanctioned fight against Ric Flair at Mayhem. Say in recent weeks, in the last week, as Finlay talks about the focus of Shane McMahon and how much this match means to him. Essentially, Scott Steiner is shown storming through the back. He is hobbling but also furious, throwing things and shouting the odds. The cameras decide to follow this instead of what may have been a quite dull interview from Fit Finlay, considering it only got a 37. Steiner heads to the locker room where Ric Flair, Mark Jindrak and Stacy Keibler are, and he is clearly holding back a lot of pain. This probably makes his anger even worse as he yells out about his bad foot being the one that was hurt by Ken Shamrock. He yells at Flair, asking what he's going to do about this. Basically, he's concerned about going into this match not 100%. Flair tells him to calm down. He always has a plan. Rest up, get some ice on it, and we'll fix this, he promises. Steiner even gets mad at Matt Jindrak, who's just stood there, and that's probably what annoys him, just his vacant blank face. But Ric Flair manages to keep the peace between the two and says, we've got a lot on our plate essentially on this Sunday. Mark's going to be facing Shawn or Dallas Page. Ric Flair's got Shane McMahon. Scott Steiner's got Ken Shamrock. We don't need any fractions between us, and he does manage to keep this under control despite the fact that everybody on every side of this war is feeling the pressure of what may be our biggest pay-per-view yet this Sunday at Mayhem. We then get Joey Styles standing on the ramp introducing Buff Bagwell. Buff is asked about this Sunday's United States Championship match against Hugh Morrus and what it means to him. Buff Bagwell focuses on last week when Jerry the King Lawler and Hugh came out and called him a loser. Now Buff admits he's taken his share of losses in his time, but that's to be expected when you're here night in and night out for over a decade. He is WCW through and through, and sure, he might have lost more matches than anybody else in this company, anybody signed to this roster right now, but what those guys failed to mention is that he's won a whole lot more matches than he's lost. What hasn't happened yet is Buff winning a singles championship, but that changes this Sunday at Mayhem when he fulfills that promise he made on the very first show of 2002. Coming out from the back, Jerry and Hugh Morrus bully Joey Styles out of there, Jerry calling him a little idiot. Go away, you pencil neck geek. Jerry laughs at Buff and tells him that he has won nothing on his own, and he never will. That isn't going to change at Mayhem. Instead, Buff is going to do what he's known for, choke when it matters. Buff comes back saying that that's funny coming from Jerry Lynn, because despite everything he's done for the last year to try and convince us that he's a legend, he's more known for yelling puppies and getting his ass kicked than he is for what he's done in the ring. Nobody gives a damn about the titles that he won back in the 19th century, but if Jerry wants a shot at Bagwell after he takes the title from his jester on Sunday, then step right up and be my guest. So continuing to tease a potential match between Buff Bagwell and Jerry Lawler here, but of course Buff says that Jerry doesn't have the guts. He then runs down Hugh Morrus, saying that he almost forgot that he was there, standing in the shadow of Jerry like he has done for the past 6 months. Buff looks Hugh dead in the eyes and says that you might be able to throw your weight around and bully a lot of people on this roster, but Buff Bagwell is not one of them. He poses, he shows his muscles, he's not up against one of these cruiserweight style guys that he's been facing recently. On Sunday, you can kiss goodbye to the United States Heavyweight Heavyweight Championship. He then pushes the microphone into the chest of Hugh Morrus and walks off. Hugh and Jarrett do not look happy to get this dressing down, but we want to see that passion and that strong character from both Bagwell. He's been a bit of a pushover in the run that we've had with him, of course, and he's kind of been goofy and daft. Well, actually, this Sunday is really, really serious for him. There's a title on the line, so we did want to show that he isn't just a character who's here to have fun and be silly. He is here to deliver when the pressure is on, and we'll see if he can do just that. Sugar Shane then finds Tori Wilson in the back and asks her what the hell that was about earlier. Did Billy put her up to this? But Tori says that he didn't. She's been looking for Shane all night, and she didn't know where else to go or how else to find him than to go and find him when he was in the ring. She says that when Billy came home after his match with Sabu last Saturday night, something had changed him. She's worried about Billy, and given that Shane has been on the receiving end of his recent actions, she wants to talk to him. Sugar Shane tries to brush it off, but she begs, using her feminine charm. She says that she doesn't know if she's going to be able to work it out with Billy long term, but it'd mean a lot for her if Shane could show some empathy and lay off Billy for a while. She knows he's a good man, and she's just asking him if he can do that. Sugar Shane doesn't seem happy, but is kind of swayed by the way that Tori looks at him with those puppy dog eyes kind of thing. Shane says that he will stay out of Billy's way as long as Billy stays out of his, but that's the best he can do. If that doesn't happen and Billy does come at him again, then he will have to deal with him. We then get a really bad match. I forgot about Cash and Noble. Despite having a couple of wins recently, they are still unimportant, and we brought in two jobbers basically, Matt Murphy and Superstar Steve. They were a tag team on the independent scene at this time, I believe, but Cash pins Superstar Steve. Luckily it's only 2 minutes and 35, but on what has already been a pretty low rated show, yeah, not great, is it? And they stand tall, the winners. They will face Super Crazy and Tajiri with the World Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships on the line at Mayhem. I think we'll just go with Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships for that name, actually. World Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships is a tad bit of a mouthful. The commentators note that Super Crazy and Tajiri will be in action 24 hours before the pay-per-view on Saturday Night Worldwide, on a show which will also include a major announcement from Jimmy Hart and Rena, and of course the commentators will do a bit more promoting for that throughout the night. Chuck Palumbo is then seen leaving the locker room and heading to the office where Arn Anderson is running the show from. Arn asks if Sean O'Hare is ready for the main event, and Chuck says that he's just spoke to him and he's fired up. He's just not sure if O'Hare or Diamond Dallas Page for that matter know what they're getting themselves in for when one of them faces Mark Jindrak tonight, but Palumbo's not here to talk about that. He wants to ask about Shane. Chuck asks if Arn has spoke to him as he's worried about him this Sunday, and as Arn begins to talk, Shane McMahon walks into the office, which causes Chuck and Arn to go silent. Shane looks at the two of them, he's confused and asks if everything is okay. When they don't say anything, he jokes that you guys aren't in here secretly plotting against me, are you? Shane laughs, but because of the gravity of the situation, because of the tension in the company at the minute, Arn and Chuck don't quite find it funny. Chuck says that he was coming in here to find Shane and to thank him for believing in him from day one, not just as a boss, but as a friend too. Chuck says that O'Hare really doesn't do emotion, so it's just as well that he's out preparing for a match, but he wants Shane to know that the support means just as much to Sean O'Hare as it does to Chuck. Chuck says that whatever happens on Sunday night, and whatever happens in the fallout of it, he just wants to thank Shane McMahon for everything he's done over the last year. Chuck tells Shane that he loves him, with the WCW owner appearing very touched by the sentiment. He's kind of asking what's gotten into Chuck, is everything okay? And Chuck just says that the state of the company, everything that's going on, the match with Jindrak, the match with Flair, he's worried, but he brings it in and hugs Shane McMahon, holding it for a while and wishing him luck on Sunday. He says whatever happens, he will be there, so Shane doesn't need to worry about that. And yeah, Chuck Palumbo getting a little bit sentimental, which again is designed to add gravitas to just how serious what he's getting himself in for his on Sunday, an unsanctioned fight against somebody who knows every trick in the book. And the fear from Chuck Palumbo is that come next Wednesday, Mark Jindrak could have taken out Diamond Dallas Page, or more concerningly, his best friend Sean O'Hare, and his other friend Shane McMahon could have been taken out by Ric Flair, and we're in a very, very different and dark scenario for WCW. I did hope we'd at least get into the 70s with this, but it's face, so I kind of understand. And again, it's been a night of not that clean finishes, to be fair, but we do get Diamond Dallas Page defeating Sean O'Hare in 8 minutes and 43, but it's by count out, and actually Sean O'Hare gets the better of the match. He escapes an attempted Diamond Cutter and manages to take Dallas down, hits him with a senton, but before he can get the pin, Stacy Keibler has come down and distracted the referee, and as O'Haire kind of rolls out of the senton that he's just hit, Matt Jindrak grabs him and drags him to the outside, throwing him into the guardrail and then decapitating him with that lariat that he has used to beat multiple people. DDP's still down from the senton and the referee starts counting. He's kind of got no choice, and it's only as DDP becomes semi-aware of his surroundings in the ring that the referee counts to 10, and it is a count-out victory, but both men are essentially down on the ground. DDP drags himself up by the ropes after winning in bizarre circumstances. He's confused about what happened and how it happened, but it will be Diamond Dallas Page versus Matt Jindrak on Sunday, and the big man is stood behind DDP. He senses it, turning round after his grueling contest, expecting an assault from Jindrak, but instead the two men just go face to face, with Jindrak trash talking about how Dallas's beating can wait for Sunday. Mark then leaves the ring with Stacy, being confronted by Chuck Palumbo, who is on his way down to check on his partner and friend Sean O'Haire. Jindrak just snarls at Chuck and doesn't back down, heading to the back ahead of his huge pay-per-view match on Sunday. Chuck Palumbo on the outside checks on Sean O'Haire, who is hurt but also very angry about what's just gone down, while Diamond Dallas Page is still confused. He's kind of not apologetic, but it's like that's obviously not how he wanted it to go down. But ultimately it's going to be DDP versus Matt Jindrak as the final confirmed match for this Sunday's pay-per-view, and we return to the final part of the show, which gets a good rating. I was a little bit concerned with it being another one involving Arn Anderson, but that 88 in the middle part 2 there does mean that it's a solid segment. I'm thinking this show's going to be low 70s, but I think we can just about deal with that. Might even be 69. Shane McMahon comes to the ring for the final part of the show, responding to Ric Flair's words and saying that it's true that Shane hasn't been on the road like Ric Flair has been in the past, but when you look at the fights that Shane has been in, nobody can doubt that he is capable of going toe-to-toe with absolutely anybody, even if that means putting his body on the line. So the initial part of his promo is kind of just getting over that thing, the sort of reputation that Shane has, that obviously he's this nepo guy, but he always put his body on the line in ways that he didn't necessarily have to for the sake of proving a point or for fighting for what he believed in. And on Sunday, he isn't just fighting for himself, he is fighting for WCW, which means that Ric Flair is going to have to put him in the back of an ambulance if he wants to keep him down. McMahon might not be seen as a wrestler, he might not be a full-time competitor like the guys in the locker room, but let's not forget, Ric Flair hasn't been in a ring for almost a year. This Sunday will be the first time he has done so since the night that he claims tore his heart out, the very same night that Shane McMahon bought WCW. And what are we? 24th of March for the pay-per-view, so the 26th of March was when Shane bought WCW, so a very, very poignant moment for it to all come full circle almost exactly a year later. Shane McMahon says that he has the locker room behind him and he has the fans behind him, because no matter what Ric Flair says, everybody can see that Ric is only in this for himself. Coming out from the back, having heard enough, Ric Flair comes out and gets in the face of the WCW owner, and he is angry, he's fired up, he's hot out of the gate like Ric Flair so often is, and he simply does not trust Shane McMahon. For him to be so confident, he must have something up his sleeve. After all, Ric Flair knows that McMahon's like to screw people. Ric Flair says that in that case, his only option might be to strike first, and he takes his jacket off, he's taking his Rolex off, and it looks like both Ric and Shane are ready to fight there and then, when Arn Anderson storms down to the ring with authority. He gets in both men's faces, physically pushing them both back and just kind of getting over the respect and authority that he does hold to both of them, despite Shane being his boss and Ric Flair basically not caring about anything. We do want to put over that when he pushes them away from each other, they don't try and get back to each other, they don't try and push him back. It really is that Arn's seriousness and hopefully the demeanour he gets across does make it clear that these two men have to listen to him. Of course, he's in charge tonight and he's in charge at Mayhem, so he can make these men's lives more difficult if he wants to, but he says that he's not here to pick sides. But let's be honest, if there's one man that cannot be trusted to play by the rules, to not have something up his sleeve, it's the self-proclaimed dirtiest player in the game. Arn has taken advice from some people in the back who he trusts very, very dearly, and the enforcer has made a decision. On Sunday night, he will instruct everybody on the WCW roster to leave the building before the unsanctioned fight. The World Heavyweight Championship main event will take place, and then everybody will be told to leave. As far as he's concerned, their jobs will be done and they're not needed. However, as we know, Ric Flair doesn't answer to WCW, and neither do Mark Jindrak and Scott Steiner. They only answer to Ric Flair. Therefore, Shane McMahon will be allowed to pick 2 members of the WCW roster to remain for the duration of that unsanctioned fight. Of course, the concern being that if Mark and Scott get involved and everybody else has been sent away, then Shane's basically screwed. So they will stay there as an insurance policy. Shane has until Sunday night to make his decision on who that will be, but by the time the fight breaks out, there will only be those 4 men in the back, as well as Ric Flair, Shane McMahon and Arn Anderson, who will be remaining in the building, of course, as he is running the show. Order will be enforced, and Arn Anderson says that neither men can have any excuses come this time next week. That's the most important thing for him. It's been mayhem, it's been chaos in the build to this, but both men have agreed to this unsanctioned fight, so he wants it to be a very clear case that there are no rules, but there can only be one winner. He remains in the ring, the 2 men facing off at the end of Nitro, and Arn Anderson has very much laid down the law. But what I felt like I could have maybe done this in Arn Anderson's promo earlier, but I think this was a good way to sort of put an exclamation point on the storyline. It's the fact that there's now that heightened tension. Arn Anderson, can he have his arm twisted by Ric Flair, and then he's one of the only guys in the building? Could it be the time that we see Arn Anderson turn? Scott Steiner and Matt Jindrak, 2 people of Shane McMahon's choosing, will be there. So the heightened tension and drama there, it's not going to be a case of 10 people from both sides of this war coming out. It's going to literally be those guys and the competitors left in the building, and that for me sets up for some potential high drama in the final match, albeit not technically the main event of WCW Mayhem, and that's a 70 overall rating. And I did kind of feel like there was something a little bit off with the pacing of that show, with the finishes on the show, so I think it is absolutely fair that we don't get that good of a rating for tonight's episode. But we will now book worldwide. We've got Super Crazy and Yoshihiro Tajiri confirmed to be in action. We also have Psicosis, who will be competing, and I do just want to look if that victory has helped Jamie Noble and Cash in any way. No, it's not made any difference, but they will be in a big pay-per-view match, so while being unimportant, I think it is a good moment for them. And yeah, we'll get into Worldwide now. Worldwide begins with a joint promo from Jimmy Hart and Rena in the back, letting viewers know that at the end of tonight's show, there'll be a major announcement from the pair of them. So we kick off the show in the office before going into a promo from Chavo Guerrero Jr., who puts over Psicosis on his way to the ring, and they're joined by Principe Justicia Jr., and they suggest that whatever's left of AJ Styles after what Justice did to him on Wednesday night, basically, he has no chance of retaining his championship. Now, Psicosis and Chavo Guerrero defeat 3 count. I didn't really have anybody who I wanted Psicosis to beat in a singles match that wasn't also unimportant, so I thought that it was better to have a good match, thanks to it having Chavo Guerrero, who's recognisable in it, rather than having him beat, say, Shannon Moore, and it get like a 30-odd rating. So yeah, that's the decision for that. Psicosis picking up a win 24 hours before his championship challenge at Mayhem this Sunday. Lucha Royale, the new Lucha Royale, stand tall in the ring as we get an interview with Kanyon, who says that Nova was taken out last weekend on a house show and now he's out of action. Therefore tonight it is going to be Jet and De Niro facing the Knight family, and the Generation of Innovation aren't in the mood for any games or any silliness or any rapping from Brian Knight, to say the least. Just, yeah, very, very serious from them. Steve Corino goes into the office and demands to know what the big announcement is. He's kind of trying to play it as a big shot former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, but Jimmy Hart and Rena refuse to give the announcement away, but do say that they think that Corino is going to like what they have in store for the show, so he should stick around. Brian Lawler and Nelson Knight, Brian Knight obviously, that's the whole point of the gimmick, and I'm calling him Lawler in the segment, come down to the ring as Knight raps, Brian Knight that is. They are jumped by their opponents from behind, and that is ultimately what gives the other heels, but the heels, the edge, as Jet and De Niro defeat the Knight family when De Niro pins Brian Knight with an Argentine neckbreaker. I thought it was just a good time to give De Niro a victory, and Brian Knight, I'm not really that bothered about their win-loss record. Kanyon then joins De Niro and Jet, and they're very, very happy to have finally picked up a win. Maybe not a good sign for Nova that now that he's out of the picture, they're actually seeming to do pretty well. David Flair, Pete Gas and Rodney are shown angrily leaving the office of Jimmy Hart and Rena. They say they're sick of this whole place and the way they're being treated, especially worldwide. He's going to go and speak to his father, and somebody ought to do something about the way they're being treated. As they continue on, they run into the CIA guys, and Guido says that he will be more than happy to do something about them. So a basic meeting in the backstage type segment as we go into the third match of the show. Kurt Hennig defeating Crowbar in 8 minutes and 33. doing a professional job in a good match, but rather unremarkable, and that's what we put over after the match, really. He has his arm raised in the ring, then leaves with little fanfare, job done. We then get a video package that just looks at the impressive run of Sabu in WCW so far. Most recently, he defeated Billy Kidman in an Extreme Rules match last week, and we're just pointing out that he is currently undefeated in WCW. Rena returns to the office, having been somewhere else, to find Jimmy Hart out cold in the back. She's very concerned. She screams out for help. This segment was rated on her dramatic acting and Jimmy Hart selling an injury, so it's not done too well. But the big twist on tonight's Worldwide is that this announcement that they were going to have, is it going to be delayed? Can it still go ahead with Jimmy Hart no longer conscious? I guess we'll find out after the main event, which sees Super Crazy and Tajiri defeat first round eliminated Christopher Daniels and Michael Modest. I'm trying to say that they were in that tournament, but eliminated in the first round. Decent match, good performances from Yoshihiro Tajiri and Super Crazy. Very, very happy with their performances, if not the match overall. That's just unremarkably average. Tajiri pins Christopher Daniels. Obviously should have had Michael Modest taking the fall there, but in just over 7.5 minutes. Super Crazy and Yoshihiro Tajiri then celebrate their victory, with Rena coming out, and she's kind of reserved. She looks quite upset about what happened to Jimmy Hart just moments ago, but she does give sort of a light applause to the victors, as the commentators put over that they will face Cash and Noble this Sunday for the Cruiserweight Tag Team Championships. Those titles have been vacant for almost a year, of course, so a big match, and I think that will open the pay-per-view. Rena takes a microphone and says that this is very difficult for her to do right now, given what's just happened to Jimmy Hart, and we do say here that during the match we saw him loaded into an ambulance, so he's not even in the building now. She knows he would have wanted the show to go on regardless of what happened to him. Rena says that starting next week, Saturday night is going to remain the same show that fans know and love. However, instead of the usual 60-minute runtime, the show will be extended to 90 minutes. When she came on board, she made it her mission to push the boundaries of what WCW Saturday Night was, and that included her wanting to take this show to the extreme. That is exactly what they're going to do, because next week, that first hour, the 60-minute runtime that we know and love, that will feature the great action that we've become used to in the last 6 months or whatever it is, but the final half hour of the show will see them push the limits in every way possible as Saturday night becomes uncensored. Whether Jimmy is back in time or not, she commits herself to putting on a show that he would be proud of. This means even more in the light of the apparent attack that took place in his office earlier, because now the show that he built from the ground up, he was the general manager from day one, or I think it was actually the second week when we made him general manager, commissioner I should say. But yeah, she now has this mission to fly the flag for Saturday night, which will now be broken up into a first hour, which will be WCW Saturday Night Worldwide, and then the final 30 minutes will be WCW Saturday Night Uncensored, and will feature basically those Extreme Rules matches that we've seen, and maybe some more risky angles if I decide to book some of them. But yeah, we're losing popularity after a not great episode of Nitro, I will admit that. And the reason I missed a week was because I was struggling to put this go home show together, to be honest. I just couldn't get the flow of it right. I think I kind of got my heart set on Mike Awesome and Andrew Martin being the opener, but I think it kind of screwed up the rest of the flow of the show, because there were sort of long runs of angles and then short matches in there. I think I probably could have rearranged the show, but I just wanted to open with that big match and then the angle with Vader and Mike Awesome to make that seem important. But whatever you think of what we've done, at least we are now at the Mayhem pay-per-view, which is one I've been massively looking forward to booking. It's in just 3 days' time, so I'll get the card into the pre-booking and set everything up like that. One thing I will just do before we go actually is change Nitro, which I've been messing up with week in and week out now. I do want that to be a 2-hour show rather than 1 hour 30, but every time between shows I've forgot to change it, so I've been having to mess around in the preferences. But we will now try and make Saturday Night Worldwide a 1 hour 30 show, the first hour being worldwide, the final 30 minutes being uncensored. And I'm hoping that just gives, basically, it's because the roster's got so big, I felt like even the B show now needed 90 minutes so that we could flesh stuff out and get everybody on it. But also, I've wanted to do the uncensored thing and have a sort of ECW B show, so this is kind of the middle ground where eventually we might go to it just being WCW Uncensored as the B show. Obviously that'll then be dropped from the pay-per-view calendar, but for now it's kind of just a trial run for WCW Saturday Night Uncensored as part of the overall show. That's enough waffling as we look forward to the big pay-per-view. Ric Flair back in the ring for the first time in this save. albeit in what is technically an unsanctioned match, but hopefully you are looking forward to that pay-per-view just as much as I am, and I'll see you for that one in the next video. That morale's not looking good, is it?